Tell me about a complicated man. Muse, tell me how he wandered and was lost, when he had wrecked the holy town of Troy, and where he went, who he met, the pain he suffered on the sea, and how he worked to save his life and bring his men home. He failed, and for their own mistakes, they died. They ate the sun god's cattle, and the god kept them from home. Now, goddess child of Zeus, tell me the old story for our modern times. Find the beginning. Hello, mortals, monsters, and myth lovers alike. You're listening to Podcast of Poseidon, where we explore how ancient myths become modern pop culture, braiding Rick Riordan's, Percy Jackson, and the Olympians. This is Chapter 27, The Odyssey. I'm your co-host, on loan from Hunters of Artemis, Darien and Smartt. Joining me is my co-host and brother, hailing from Ithaca, DJ.
How's everybody doing today? Yeah, the politics of Ithaca is a little out of whack right now. Our king is missing, and these are just a bunch of douchebags kind of trying to take it. Really hope they don't get it, but honestly, our king isn't super great either. Anyway, not what this episode is about.
Actually, it's exactly what this episode is about.
What?
Whoa.
Really? Wow.
Before we get into that, let's swing by the camp store to get everything we need, because I think we're gonna need a lot to get through this episode. DJ, it's like Black Friday in here. The camp store is so packed with content today.
I know, we got a lot to cover.
We've got a lot to do. First, we owe someone a huge apology.
Yeah, we do.
We do.
But to no fault of our own.
Okay, well, a little. So first, I need to thank Owen from Through the Mist for bringing this to our attention. DJ, did you know that on Apple Podcasts, you can only receive reviews from your country?
But not.
No, I didn't either. And that's a big problem when you have listeners from other countries and you have asked many times, please leave us a review and we'll read it.
Yeah, and we keep saying it. It's like, we need a review. Turns out, we had a review.
It turns out our American listeners slacking off, but our UK listeners, top tier, especially a listener named Gustav UK.
Yeah.
Who left us a lovely, lovely 5-star review titled, I love the podcast. Hello, I'm 9. I love your podcast, but I'm really sad that I can't pay for Patreon, but I would love to. Gustav, thank you.
That's adorable. Thank you so much. You are 9 years old. We appreciate it.
Here's the thing. They left that review in July, which means Gustav could be 10 by now.
He absolutely could be 10. Thank you so much. We appreciate your review.
Thank you so much, Gustav. And you know what? Hey, it's okay. We did Patreons. It's fun. But you're listening to the main feed, and we promise you have the best content here.
Like, we do appreciate, like, your download is more than enough, right?
Yes. Thank you so much for listening and downloading and leaving that lovely review. It made us both very emotional.
Yeah.
And I have looked into finding out how we can easily see reviews from all countries. So hopefully in the future, this will happen. So Gustav, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much.
Also, I want to thank another listener, Neva Flora, who sent us an email. Our first listener email.
First listener email? Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's great. Basically, Neva just says they're a huge fan of the podcast, they love Greek mythology, and they suggested that we should do an episode about Greek sorceresses, Medea, Circe, Pasiphae, and Ariadne. And I say, fuck yeah.
I'm into it. That would be fun.
Absolutely. Their email did make me realize that Ariadne and Pasiphae just aren't in the Riordan books, like, at all.
I could have swore that they at least mentioned Ariadne.
I mean, they mention Ariadne and they mention Pasiphae, but they don't appear at all.
What like adventures were Ariadne and Pasiphae featured in?
So Ariadne is Dionysus' wife, and she helped Theseus get out of the labyrinth.
Okay.
And Pasiphae is the Minotaur's mother.
Ah. So
they're really important. And their
really
stories
important.
are actually important to stuff that happens in the books. They just don't get to show up. So we will definitely pay them their just desserts and do an episode.
We'll talk about them for sure.
We will talk. Thank you, Neva. I appreciate you so much taking time to email us.
To be fair, he had a lot in Battle of the Labyrinth. He had a fucking ton in Battle of the Labyrinth.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying. Flashback, at least. What are we doing here? Okay, one more person.
We got those flashbacks from Daedalus. Like, we got that emotional torment from that.
Who are we going to torture you with? Also, we have to get in a whole. Yeah, Theseus abandons Ariadne on an island. So.
Yeah.
She gets him. He admits that she gets him through the labyrinth, and he leaves her on an island.
Yeah, and then Dionysus wasn't stoked about that, so he took her.
Yeah, he like finds her there and is like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That sucks. Are you okay?" And then they bond. Anyway, the last person that we need to thank is a listener who messages on Instagram. This is a big week.
Yeah,
y'all.
We had a
Emails and
huge
Instagram
week.
message.
This is wild. We had a lot of people coming through.
Love, do you know how it makes me so happy? I love engaging with
awesome.
people.
I may not sound it, but I'm very stoked.
Davis just has that kind of voice.
Yes.
He struggles to sound genuine. I promise he is. I'm an extrovert. I love communicating with people over all things. So this listener messaged us, and just to let us know that they were listening to our Hermes episodes. I just want to say that me, a 15-year-old, had a Robin Hood DVD, and I loved it for life. It's not entirely forgotten amongst the youth. And I just... Thank you so much. It is so good to know that this generation has not forgotten the old ways.
Yes.
Fox Robin Hood is the reason we have furries.
I don't know if I'd say that they're the reason we have furries.
Fox Robin Hood is the reason we have furries.
Kickstarted it for a lot of people, but I wouldn't say it's the reason.
How could it? Have you seen Fox Robin Hood?
Have you seen
Maid Marian? Have you seen Little John in that movie?
Absolutely, 100%. And as I said, I can agree that it maybe kickstarted a lot for a bunch of people. But as we have also said, dude, there's a chance that furries were just like around for a long time. I mean, anthropomorphic animals have been around longer than fucking.
It's a joke. Why are you?
Is it a joke?
Yes. This is ridiculous. It's gone off the rails. Okay, we have a Patreon donation to make. Thank you so much, Gustav. Thank you so much, Eva. Thank you so much to all of our listeners.
We appreciate you guys so much.
We appreciate you so much. Also, like, for listening and then taking the time to reach out for us. Just more of your time to engage with us. Time is so valuable. Thank you so much.
We love the engagement. We love the attention.
And we love you. We do love the attention, but we mostly love you.
Thank you so much.
We also love making a positive impact in our world. So let's move on to our Patreon donation. It is a new month, which means it's time for the monthly Patreon donation. Every month, we donate $1 for every patron we have on Patreon to a charitable organization.
This month, we're going local and donating to the Idaho Food Bank. In this season of excess, we'd like to support our community and help those facing food scarcity.
We currently have 5 patrons over on Patreon, so we'll be donating an additional $20, raising our overall donation to $25.
Thank you to our patrons for making this donation possible. And now on to the show.
All right, DJ, today we are talking about the Odyssey.
Yeah, we are.
It is a heavy topic in that it's the Odyssey.
It's long.
It's big, long, and it's also just like one of the oldest surviving works of Western canon. It is impactful. It is impactful now, and as much as it was impactful in ancient Greece, like Greece didn't have a set of like canonized rules across like of their religion, right? But everyone knew the Odyssey and the Iliad. Like we talk a lot about how like throughout what we call Greece, there were different versions of myths, and that's true. That is a thing. But when it comes to like the Odyssey, there were festivals at a point in time in ancient Greece in which the purpose of the festival was for competitors to recite the Odyssey correctly, which implies there were canonized versions of this story. Like there was a version that everyone considered, no, this is the way you tell the Odyssey. That's how important this story is.
Nice.
And so trying to break it down for our podcast is, I will admit, an intimidating prospect.
It's a challenge.
Yes. because it is important, and I want to do it well. So I will start the way we always start. DJ, what do you know about the Odyssey?
Well, I know a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, Odysseus, leaving Troy, gets lost at sea. And after a while, people be like, hey, we need a new king. And so they try and start just bothering the shit out of the current queen. Mm-hmm. And Odysseus' trials include, but not limited to, Circe, Calypso, Polyphemus, Scylla, and Charybdis. Those are the only ones that are coming to mind right now, and those are just like the main,
those are some
most popular ones,
those are some big ones.
And I know that there's more. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty big book.
Yes,
you know. But yeah, I can't name them all.
I mean, yeah, and I wouldn't expect you to know them all just off the top of your head. Like, it's a big book. Specifically, it is 24 books. Like that is how you break down that is how the Odyssey is broken up. It's broken up to 24 books. Now, the entire story that we have been referencing throughout this season of the podcast is the translation by Emily Wilson. For two reasons. One, it's the version that my roommate happened to have bought, so it was great to be able to physically have it. But there are other reasons why I wanted to reference this version specifically that I will get into later when we talk about Wilson and her work with the Odyssey, because I think we're going to talk about the Odyssey. Talking about translations of it is equally important. Mm-hmm. But for this, let me give you an exact one. Because what is remarkable about Wilson's translation is that she was very, very careful to translate it lengthwise exactly. Her translation has the same number of lines as the original Odyssey. Like, well, the original text that we have, the surviving text that we have. Yeah. She notes in her translator's notes that oftentimes translations will be much longer because the translators will use like different languages to try to capture mood, and she intentionally tried to avoid doing that. And that does not make her translation better or worse than anyone else's. It just makes hers. She had a different purpose in mind. So, yeah, this translation of the Odyssey is 525 pages long.
It's a long book.
It's a long book. And as I was getting into it for this episode, the first thing I learned that was remarkable is that Odysseus does not appear until book 5.
Really?
Yeah. So the Odyssey opens with a council of the gods. Zeus is kind of bemoaning what happened to Agamemnon. We discussed him in our Fates episode, our Furies episode, season 1. He's the guy that killed his daughter to sacrifice her before the Trojan War, and his wife not psyched about that. So she and her lover killed him when he got back home from Troy. This is a prominent background story of the Odyssey, and we'll kind of get into why later. But in this version, their son does kill the lover, but does not kill Clemestria, which is a whole other thing. But that's the version of the myth that's kind of backing the relationship of serving as kind of like a dark mirror to the relationship of Odysseus, his wife Penelope, and their son Telemachus. And speaking of Telemachus, the first 5 books is often referred to as the Telemachy because it's about him. So when we start, Council of the Gods, Zeus has been moaning, well, look, I have to add Agamemnon. Sucks to be you, man. Yeah. Oh, well. And Athena's like, hey, Dad, Odysseus has been stuck on Calypso's island for a while. I would really like to get him off that island. And then we go to Ithaca. That plot being unresolved. Go to Ithaca, where it has been 20 years since Odysseus took off for the Trojan War. So his son, Telemachus, who was an infant, is a grown-ass man. In age, if not in behavior, because a theme of the Telemachus through the Odyssey is him trying to grow into manhood and what that looks like in this story. Yeah. It often looks like him putting his mother in her place. So there's that. Sure. But essentially, so like you mentioned, you have all the suitors who all want to marry Penelope so they can be king of Ithaca and divide up all of the goods, all of Odysseus' wealth. Because as soon as Penelope picks someone, they are going to divide up the wealth And then they're also going to take her to her house. They leave her. They're going to drag her off. They're going to go to wherever they live. So that's something Penelope is dealing with because she's like, this sucks. Don't want to do that. I think my husband could still be alive. I'd not really like to give up hope. You're all assholes. Also, I've lived in this house my entire adult life. I don't want to leave it. This is my
bed is literally a tree.
Is literally a tree. Quite literally carved out of a still living tree. So
yeah.
So that's what they're going through. And the suitors are definitely plotting to kill Telemachus. Like, that's a thing. In addition to, like, destroying the house and, like, using up all of the wealth because Telemachus and Penelope have to be good hosts, right? They are staying at their home, so they have to...
That was a big thing for the Greeks.
That's a big thing for the Greeks. We talk about it in the Polyphemus episode. They have to provide them with food and banquets and, lodging and shit. Even though these guys suck. Like, this is not morally in question. This is not us looking back now and being like, wow, Zeus is terrible. Like, this is literally, like, in the text of the Odyssey, you're supposed to understand that not even for the time, these dudes sucked.
Yeah.
So, with a little prodding from Athena in disguise, Telemachus decides, I'm going to go find my dad. So he sets out on this 5-book journey, basically just hitting up his dad's old war buddies and being like, what's up? Do you know where he's at? He was like Sparta and sees Helen. Yeah, that Helen of Troy that the Iliad was all about. So she's back in Greece now. She and her husband are doing pretty great. They've got a lot of worldly goods that they enjoy together. So
nice.
So yeah, that's what Telemachus is doing. And then we finally, again, 5 books. We get to 5 books. And then we meet Odysseus proper. First, he has been set up by the discussion of the gods and the discussion of, like, his family and his war friends. Like, we have been given a vision of who Odysseus is. Like, clever, fought in the war, like, you know, did the Trojan horse, invented the wooden horse, let them sneak into Troy and sack the city and end the war. When we meet him, this doesn't look like the guy that they had been talking about. He is mournfully depressed. He has been imprisoned on Calypso's island for 7 years because the goddess has fallen in love with him. She rescued him when he washed up on her island, half drowned. And for a while, things were pretty good. Like, very clearly, like, it's mentioned that Odysseus consensually was hooking up with this goddess, like, was into being able to, like, hang out on the island and, like, have sex with this goddess and enjoy all the fruits of her island. But in time is like, I want to go home. I'm done. I miss my wife. I want to go home. And Calypso's like, no, you can't. I love you. You're going to stay here, and you just have to say yes to me, and I will make you immortal. You don't have to worry about dying. You'll be here forever. I'll take care of you forever. It'll be great. And Odysseus like, no, I'm done. I want to leave. So 7 years. So we don't know how long we've switched from Odysseus is happy chilling on the island to Odysseus is not happy here anymore. But considering that he is the favorite of Athena, and the book opens with not very long ago Athena telling her dad that we need to get him off the island, I would interpret that as very recently has this change been made.
Yeah.
So for roughly 7 years, and that's not to say that, like, Calypso was right to keep him on the island. If he wants to leave, you gotta let him go. Which is basically what Zeus tells her when he sends Hermes. But we'll get into Calypso proper at a later time. Eventually. So Hermes shows up. You gotta let him go. Calypso's like, fuck off, but fine. Odysseus builds a boat. A raft takes off. Poseidon is like, hey, no, remember me? Fuck you. Sinks the raft. Odysseus washes up on an island. But it's okay, because thanks to Athena, she has already set it up that the local princess is going to find him and take him to the palace. So he gets proper guest hospitality at this great palace. And the bard happens to be telling different stories about the Trojan War and stuff. And eventually...
It's like, whoa, that was
it was basically, it gets very emotional about it. And eventually he comes out and tells the king who he is. Like, I'm Odysseus. And the king's like, no shit, tell me your story. This is book 13. This is book 13. We are at book 13. And now we get...
How long is each book?
I said 13. That's my mistake. Book 9. The length of each...
But how long is each book?
The length of the book, they vary a little bit, right? So, let me see. So I'll say, so the first 5 books. And it's important to note, like, so it's not the layout of this story is written in iambic pentameter. It's not how original Greek poems were written, but it is how Wilson chose to do her translation, because that's a cadence that's familiar to English-speaking audiences. Like, we know it because of Shakespeare. We are familiar with stories, though she does not use the archaic Shakespeare, like that kind of language. And she actually goes into why, and I definitely want to talk about that later. But, so I'll show you, DJ. So the lines don't go all the way across the page, but there are no page breaks. So it is just a thick wall of text. It's an epic. It's an epic poem. This is the way it's structured. So by the time we meet Odysseus at the beginning of book 5, 180 pages in.
So like a third of the way through.
Third of the way through the book. And by the time we get to the part of the story where Odysseus is telling the beginning of the story, we are 240 pages in. So that's book 9.
Okay, so so like what we know as the Odyssey is only really about 250 pages.
Yeah, and here's the thing, James. Less than that. Yeah. So a lot of what we know as the Odyssey, as you put it, is like the stories you cited, like Circe, the beginning of Calypso, Scylla and Charybdis, Polyphemus, Lystragonians, Aeolus and the Bag of Winds. Like, those are all told as a really extended flashback. Here's how it starts. And this is super important because I think it also highlights, we call Odysseus a hero because that is what he was to the Greeks. He's someone who did heroic things, but in that era, hero had nothing to do with morality or behavior. It was purely action. Because the first thing that he does after he's been blown off course, because all the Greeks got blown off course, right? After they sacked the city. So I don't remember.
Poseidon wasn't super happy because he was on the losing side.
Yes, but neither was Athena, because I don't remember the name of this. I don't remember this one. But one of the Greek warriors goes to her temple in Troy and rapes one of her priestesses. And Athena's fucking pissed. Because that's a slight to her. Like, how fucking dare you? I was on your side and you're going to treat my temple so disrespectfully. So she and Poseidon team up and blow all the Greeks off course.
And she realized, oh no, I like
Odysseus. He's my favorite because he's cunning and clever.
Oh, there's Odysseus. I rather like that one.
Yeah. Basically that. So they all get blown off course. And they end up on Sionis, which is an island, where they proceed to sack the city, kill all the men, and take all the women as sex slaves. And then instead of just leaving immediately, Odysseus and his crew hang out on the beach drinking. And like partying to their success. So when, the next morning, the remaining citizens of this island attack, because they only sacked the city, right? They didn't do they didn't destroy the whole. The remaining citizens show up and kill some Odysseus' men as they escape back to their ship and take the fuck off. So that's actually the first thing Odysseus does after Troy.
Well,
this is how the adventure starts.
Sacking a city, that's a Greek heroism.
Yeah.
Sacking a city.
Yeah. And so it's wild because as you talked earlier, hospitality is a big thing. And yet the first thing, and so a lot of like the shitty things Odysseus does, like to Polyphemus and stuff, is justified because he was not hospitable. And yet the first thing Odysseus does is prove why some people shouldn't be hospitable to strangers.
Were they hospitable to him immediately?
No, he just showed up and sacked the city.
There you go. Like, they didn't even get the chance.
Yeah.
So who cares?
Well,
so who cares about the hospitality part?
The Odyssey cares. It's a reoccurring theme.
Yeah, the Odyssey cares when those people, given the chance to show hospitality, don't show hospitality. Right? Yeah. Now, these people, they didn't get the chance to. So there's also the possibility that they would have just been dicks to these people. Where is this island again?
So it's, I'm probably saying around Sionis, which the point is, actually, DJ, you actually make a good point, is that these are not Greeks. These are foreigners.
Yeah. So these aren't Greeks. He has no real reason to care about who these people are. And that's why Greeks viewed that as a heroic act.
You're not wrong. It's
because these aren't Greeks. It's like, he just sacked an enemy city. Who gives a shit? It's just the Viking mentality.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. In Polyphemus, it's also often an interpretation that the Cyclopses represent Sicilians, who were not Greeks, who had a very different lifestyle than the Greeks, and thus would be monstrous because they are foreigners. Xenophobia is a big theme in the Odyssey.
Well, yeah, it's just like the outside world is scary.
Not wrong. Yeah, basically that. So from there,
it was also at a time when like the world absolutely was not connected, and what you knew was your essentially city,
true,
or town, and that's all you knew. And so when somebody else from out of town came in, you're like, "Whoa, who the fuck are you? I don't know you. I don't trust you."
I would say we are still like that today.
I'd say it's way better than it was.
I would say I disagree. Because if you look like the people who are local, you'll probably be fine. But if you don't look like the people who are local, you maybe have more of a hard time going to the new place.
Maybe. But then they're even like, back then, it's like, I don't know your face. Even if they looked like the person, let's say they were white, you know, and they came in, it's like, dude, I don't recognize your face. I don't trust you.
And that is a theme of the Odyssey, is like, I don't recognize you, I don't trust you, or you should treat the stranger well. It is interesting. Yeah. So here we go, from the sacking of the city, and then getting kicked off because instead of leaving, they had a party on the beach. Fuck, okay. We get the Odysseus and his crew encounter, in this order, the Lotus Eaters, Polyphemus, Aeolus and his bag of winds, which they proceed to blow them off course because his crew thought it was treasure. And then we get the Lystragonians, we get Circe, we get the Underworld, we get Circe again, we get the Sirens, then we get Scylla and Charybdis. And then finally, they end up on the island of the sun god. And while Odysseus is napping, the crew decide, well, we don't want to starve to death, so let's just eat the sun god's cattle. They know that he's going to get pissed. But the crewman who's like, because Odysseus has told him to leave the fucking cattle alone. But the member of the crew who's essentially...
Don't eat the fucking cattle. It seems like his crew fucking suck. I would argue suck a little more than Odysseus.
I would argue that Odysseus often treats... he will refer to them as like brother, as a phyla, as family when he speaks to them. But in the narration, it uses words that are more like servant. Which implies that Odysseus is like...
It's because now he realizes now, God, these guys were dicks.
I would say it's more like...
retrospective.
I think it's more like the kind of boss who says, we're all family here. And then says, I'm going to need you to work on Thanksgiving.
Maybe.
I'd say it's that. Also, there are a lot of times where Odysseus sends his men to do the dangerous thing, a la what happened on the Lystragonian island. While he moors his ship way far out. And, like, not telling his crew they're going to go past Scylla and just let 6 of them get eaten. Oh, well.
Well, yeah. Right? Like, let's be real here. Again, this is a more along the lines of, we'll go back to that boss thing, right? The boss is now assigned with firing 6 people. Do you go around and tell everybody's like, yeah, I got to fire 6 of you? Or do you just pull them into your office and fire them?
I mean, I guess. And this, I think the metaphor doesn't work because they got 8.
Well, let's be real here. They got 8 by the economy. They got fired.
So one of the crewmen basically essentially usurps Odysseus' authority by saying, we're going to eat these cows because the alternative is we're going to starve to death and I would rather be killed by the gods than die in such a pathetic manner. So they eat the cows. And Helios is like, fuck you. And he goes to Zeus. And Zeus is like, yeah, fuck them. So as soon as they set sail again, Zeus just smites the boat. Everybody but Odysseus dies.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, right? And Odysseus ends up back at Scylla and Charybdis. That's how far back he gets washed.
Son of a
like clinging
bitch.
to a rock like, shit, I'm gonna die. So he eventually gets washed up onto Circe's island, and that's where he spends the next 7 years. So we had the 3 years of adventure, 7 years, I said Circe, sorry, Calypso's island.
Yeah, that's, yeah. I was about to correct you.
And that gives us book 13. So if you recall, book 9 is when he starts his 600 flashback about the Odyssey journey, the stories. And now we're so 4 books.
So it took him the same amount of books to describe all of his journeys as it did to take him to go from Calypso to this place.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly that. Exactly that. If we're doing by page count, as you mentioned, we go from page 240 to page 316.
So it's even like
Le-
the same amount of pages, give or take 20.
less than 100 pages.
Yeah, and it's like the same amount of pages that it took for him to go from Calypso's to this place. Because that's like 60, right?
So in book 13, once he is done telling his story to the king is like, what a tale, what an adventure. Thank you for regaling us with that. That was amazing.
Do you want to go home? I'll help
Exactly. He gives him a boat full of treasure and a bunch of slaves to row the oars on the boat and then just sends him back to Ithaca.
Typical Greek stuff, understandable.
So then Athena goes to check in with Telemachus, because we have actually not heard from him since book 5. Since book 5, we have no idea where he is at. Checks in with Telemachus. He's still actually on Sparta, checking in. And she's like, you got to go home. Your dad's going to be there. She's also in disguise. Athena disguises herself as like a bunch of different people. She disguises herself as like friends and like old slaves and like young girls. Like, she has a bunch of different disguises.
She has a good
time with it, right?
Like,
she uses the mist and disguise.
Honestly, if I was a god, I'd have a good time with it too.
All the time. So he sends him to Telemachus. Telemachus goes back to Ithaca, and Odysseus goes to Ithaca in book 13.
Yep.
So you may recall there's
no adventures between the king and Ithaca. Nothing. He just
goes back to Ithaca. Yeah. He just gets back to Ithaca.
It must have been literally right down the road.
I think it was just a skip and a hop down the road.
I do not. Yeah, I believe it was probably just like he could pick up a stone and skip it, and by the time it falls through, it'd be at Ithaca.
Yeah, it doesn't fall through. It hits Ithaca. He takes up someone's window. See it on the horizon. Yeah, basically.
Straight up, see it on the horizon. Be like, there's my home. Can you help me out? I just need to get back.
Yeah. So as you may recall, there's so that brings us to book 14. Odysseus is back on Ithaca. Now, at first, he doesn't actually recognize Ithaca. For some reason, Athena disguises it, so he's not he's not aware of where he is. But that fades pretty quickly, and he runs into like one of his former slaves who picks him up and helps him out. He's like, because now Odysseus is disguised as an old beggar.
Yeah.
This is book 14. You may recall there were 24 books.
What?
We're back on Ithaca. 10 books. The first 5 of the series of the story, not about Odysseus. It's about Telemachus. Last 10, he's actually on Ithaca. That's
so 50. What happened in these 10 books? That weren't 10 fucking
Here's
books?
The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that the Odyssey, the actual Odyssey text is
that we know it as is like 200. Less than 200 pages.
Exactly. The thing we know, the thing that we are so familiar with when we think of the Odyssey.
It's only 140 pages.
Only 140 pages, essentially. And the story is so much more. So I want to talk about DJ. Why do you think that is?
I honestly don't. Maybe it just goes through the rest of Odysseus's life. And it's like, people see that and like, that's boring shit. We want the action. And so we'll teach that. Because like in high school, we went through the Odyssey. Mm-hmm. But as you said, we didn't go through the Odyssey. We went through from him leaving Troy, and I guess recounting this tale of leaving Troy, to him showing up at Ithaca and slaughtering the suitors. And those are what we know as the Odyssey. Mm-hmm.
So that's him slaughtering the suitors is like the last 10 books. Like,
so they just describe him fucking going to town on these people for 10 books.
This last part of the Odyssey, the third part, right? You can probably divide it into like 3 parts. The part that is the beginning, the part that is the actual like story of his adventures at sea, and then this part where he's on Ithaca. It's him, Telemachus, and Athena plotting to kill the suitors.
It takes that long?
A lot of stuff happens. There's a lot of disguises. There's a lot of shenanigans. All right. There's Odysseus.
I imagine so. There better be a lot of shenanigans for a fucking, what is it? At this point, 150, 200 pages left.
So book 14 starts in this one at page 332. And as I said, it goes to
like 200 pages left.
Yeah. Like just over like 530. Yeah. So Yeah, like 200 pages. More of it is him actually on Ithaca than him going through the adventure at sea. And the reason why that is because this is...
It's because Odysseus is a fucking horrid storyteller.
So bad. The part that we actually want to hear about, he just really glossed over.
I bet if it was Homer describing all of these stories, he would have come out and like... These stories have been absolutely grand, but because it was Homer describing Odysseus describing these stories, it's like he's got to sum it up in like an hour,
and then he sums it up.
He's got to sum it up in an hour because he's talking to a king who's most likely will get bored of him in like here in 20 minutes, so he's got to quickly get it done.
Yeah, he tells it even shorter version later when he tells it to his wife and leaves out a couple parts about Circe and Calypso. Yeah. Also him flirting with Athena all the time. So the last 10 books, 200 pages. He's actually on Ithaca. He's made it back to Ithaca. And it's him and Telemachus and Athena planning to kill the suitors. So Odysseus spends a lot of time disguised as this like old beggar, right? Athena's like set him up with a disguise. No one recognizes him. She pulled the disguise down so he could be like, my son. And Telemachus is like, Dad, I've never seen you as an adult before, so I don't know how I possibly recognize you on sight, but you're my dad. So there's that. So they're working together.
I don't know how Odysseus would recognize Telemachus because baby to adult?
Also that.
Adult, from like 25 years to 45 years, I would be able to tell my dad apart, Like if I look at when he had you versus when he had Colt.
Yeah.
Like that's the same dude, maybe chop the mullet, yeah. Yeah, a little bit of graying, little silver fox going on. But baby to dad, I don't think I would, baby to 25 years old, I don't think I'd recognize Colt.
No, that's true. That is a good point. I do think Athena is just telling him, that's your son. This is your father. Oh, shit. And they just roll with it.
Probably.
So there's that. So Odysseus spends a lot of time disguised as a beggar, specifically to see who is loyal to him. This is a big part of being on Ithaca again. So he goes to his house, right? And is like, these suitors fucking suck. And he sees that, like, all right, who's loyal? It's like, my wife's still loyal to me. She is. The old slave woman who cared for me as a child, she's still loyal. The old slave guy who takes care of, he's still loyal. But he sees, like, some of, like, the slave girls, like, go to have sex with the suitors. And she's like, fuck those bitches. So it's, like, a lot of that. A lot of plotting. Odysseus, at one point, tells...
don't come to school tomorrow.
That he actually kind of does that. Tells a terrifying prophetic story, and one of the suitors is like, when Odysseus gets back, he's gonna kick our asses. I'm gonna leave, and Athena gets him not to leave so he can be murdered the next day.
Fuck yeah, let's go.
That's
Athena.
a thing where it's like, this story is very important to remember. She is a war goddess. Yes, she is a goddess of intelligence and wit. She is a war goddess, and she is violence and bloodshed. Yes.
She's like, absolutely. Like, I may be battle strategy, but there's still battle.
Yes, exactly. The intelligence and strategy in warfare is not the diplomacy, the avoidance of bloodshed. It is bloodshed. It is death and violence, and that is what Athena...
It is bloodshed with the least amount of casualties on my side.
Exactly
the most amount of casualties on your side.
Fucking exactly that, DJ. So...
Do you think Athena came to... Who was the guy that dropped the atomic bomb?
Definitely!
Her whole thing is that she doesn't want bloodshed on our side, but she wants as much bloodshed on your side. Mm-hmm. Ares just wants bloodshed. Doesn't matter where it's from.
Doesn't matter. Yep. That's actually the main difference between these two. So we actually get through these chapters a lot of scenes with Odysseus and Penelope. Penelope not being aware that Odysseus is Odysseus.
Yeah, because he's still trying to make sure that she's faithful, even though he's not.
Exactly. So it's fascinating. So he does. It's a lot of the time what he does is he claims he knows Odysseus, and every time Penelope asks him to tell her about where her husband is at, he changes the subject and bounces. That happens a couple of times. And there is an interesting level of the story in which you, the reader, are trying to figure out if Penelope knows he's Odysseus or not. Like, when does she figure it out? Like, does she figure it out? Does she figure it out when Athena reveals him? Is it truly later, or does she on some level know? Like Telemachus kind of knew, when the slave who helped him kind of figured it out. Like, Odysseus's old dog recognizes him, even though he's disguised. Like,
it's the smell.
Yeah, is Penelope, who is clever and strong and is described as such, she does the weaving thing, right, to continue on to put the suitors at bay. which we talked about in the Polyphemus episode. It's a lot. So it's interesting. And then you also have the whole scene where she sets up the challenge. At the end, she's finally decided, like, okay, I'm going to have to pick a suitor. The winner will be whoever can shoot my husband's bow through all of these axes, essentially.
You can draw its string and shoot it.
Mm-hmm. And Odysseus was the only person who was able to do this.
Because it's a really strong bow.
It's a really strong bow. Like, really strong bow. So what happens is you've got all the suitors in the fucking lounge room where they've been hanging out for like 10 years. And you've got, well, not even necessarily 10 years, right? They haven't been there the whole time because a lot of them are roughly Telemachus' age.
Mm-hmm.
But they've definitely been there for at least too long. Yeah. I would say. They have been there for too long. So you got the thing. They're all kind of drunk. They're all trapped in there with him. And they're trying to do the bow thing. No one can do it. No one can do it. Odysseus, this old, mysterious, dirty beggar, is the only one able to draw the bow, shoot the arrow through the thing. Perfect. Through the axis. Wow, amazing. And then turns around and kills like the rudest suitor. And then the bloodshed begins.
Yeah. And then it's funny because like Odysseus's bow, that's such like a one-off item. Mm-hmm. But it is a mythical item in just about every fucking Greek-based game.
I should definitely talk to Leo about doing an episode of like legendary artifacts of gaming on Odysseus' bow.
Because it shows up in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I can't remember what it does. I think it's just like strong. It might and it obviously it has like a special effect, and I don't remember what that is. It actually shows up in Immortal Phoenix Rising, because the whole point of that game is, you got to stop Typhon from destroying the gods, and everybody is dead. The gods have been like scattered or captured or whatever, and nobody's there, and the only one we can rely on is Phoenix. Now, interesting. Phoenix is a fucking nobody. Got no skills, is like barely a shield bearer in the Greek armor, and they show up, and then it's like they get their sword from their older brother, which was a gift from Achilles. Nice. And so you get Achilles' sword, and then Icarus's wings, and then the bracers of Hercules, and Odysseus's bow, and the axe of... I don't remember who the axe is from. I don't remember, because I always forget, because it's like, it's a name that I see, and like if I see the name, I'll know who they're talking about, but I don't know much about their myth. Not sure. So we get this Greek hero who is just souped the fuck up. And I'm like, there's like, you'd have to be an actual Nimrod to be able to fail this quest. And then Odysseus' bow is also an item in Smite that increases your attack speed, and every fourth attack sends out like a little chain lightning attack. It's pretty cool. Yes,
when we played Smite and I was Artemis, you kept having me use Odysseus' bow.
It's because it's the meta.
That was very useful. Yeah. I think in Hades, is the bow, does it have like an aspect of Odysseus' bow? Is that the thing?
I don't have all of its aspects.
Because it has a main aspect, and then it has a secret aspect.
The secret aspects are always from another pantheon.
Yeah. Is it the main aspect of Odysseus' bow, or is it...
So we get aspect of Zagreus, aspect of Chiron, and I don't know what the other two are. And then it's aspect of Ram from Hindu.
Yeah, I know them all because I listened when I was researching. I looked them up. Yeah. They're very cool.
No, yeah, because I have the spear of Guan Yu and then the aspects or the bow of Ram. Those are the two that I have.
Okay, so that's what it is. So yeah, Odysseus then with him and Telemachus proceeds to brutally slaughter all of the suitors. Oh, Athena is there too. She is disguised as someone else again. I believe it's a mentor, one of their friends. They kill all the suitors.
Hell yeah.
And it's interesting because you're reading about this, like, this is really weirdly brutal for Odysseus, who usually kind of like seems to solve things with like cunning and trickster. But when you realize like how he set up that situation to be, the suitors are trapped in the room with him, and he is the only one armed with his own bow
that nobody else can use.
That no one else
has already been proven.
The only weapon in there that he's the only one that can use it. It's brutal and horrifying, but like hot damn if it's not kind of good, though. Like, you love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah.
And then things get very horrifying when, after all the suitors have been killed, Odysseus orders Telemachus to hack all of the slave women who slept with the suitors to death. Just hack them all to pieces.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, that's rough. Because, by sleeping with the suitors, they betrayed Odysseus and the house. Never mind the fact that they were slaves and very likely were not actually consenting to what was happening to them.
Yeah, but
neither Odysseus...
This is just like Greek mythology. Consent doesn't matter.
Exactly. Neither Odysseus, Telemachus, or anybody in ancient Greece cares about that.
Yeah.
So Telemachus decides, instead of hacking them to death with the sword, he's just going to hang them, which initially reads as a less violent death, but he makes this decision because he doesn't want their impure blood to dirty the floors of his home, essentially.
Oh my god.
So there's that. So he hangs them all, and it is a rough scene to read. Like,
I believe it.
Yikes.
I believe it.
Sucks. And meanwhile, Odysseus goes to Penelope and is like, babe, it's me. And she's like, I don't buy it.
Hold on a second. Tell me something only Odysseus would know. Our bed is an olive tree. Odysseus.
Basically, she tells her slave... Hubby! Basically, she tells her slave to go make up a bed for their guest outside of the room. And Odysseus gets pissed, and he's like, woman, I made that bed myself out of a growing olive tree. It's our marriage bed. You would have to cut it down to move it. And that's when she's like, hubby!
Hubby!
And the scene is remarkably romantic.
Mm-hmm.
This passage in which they are reunited. This is book 23.
Yep. One more book.
So we're all on track. All of the suitors and the slaves have been killed in book 22, which is called Bloodshed. I haven't been mentioning, but the books do have names. So this one is book 22 or 23, The Olive Tree Bed. So she says, move the bed. And he says, woman, your words have cut my heart. Who moved my bed? It would be difficult even for a master craftsman, though what God could do with ease. No man, however young and strong, can pry it out. The trick is how this bed was made. I made it, no one else. Inside the court, there grew an olive tree with delicate young leaves, long leaves, full and green, and a sturdy pillar, and I built the room around it. And he goes on, and at that, her heart and body suddenly relaxed. She recognized the tokens he had shown her. She burst out crying, ran straight towards him, threw her arms around him, and kissed his face, and said, don't be angry at me, Odysseus. Every other way you are understanding. Then she's like, okay, babe, I had to be sure. And they're talking. It is really sweet, like their reunion. They embrace each other. I can't find the one where they describe it, but they embrace each other, weeping with like joy and heartache. And finally, at last, with joy, the husband and the wife arrived back in the rights of their old marriage bed. So they fucked in the olive tree bed.
Nice.
And then, meanwhile, Telemachus proceeds to kill all of the women. Odysseus tells Penelope the story about what he's been through, but as I mentioned earlier, super glosses over the Calypso and Circe parts.
Like, I was stuck on Calypso's island for 7 years, and she just kept me there against my will.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Circe tried to kill my men, then she ended up helping me out.
Yeah, it's the gods helped. And that's all the details you need to know, babe. Because that's probably a good time to talk about female womanly fidelity is like a big theme in the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Because it is in fact totally fine that Odysseus had sex with Circe and Calypso and like maybe that princess that found him on the island and brought her to her dad's house.
Maybe.
Who's
to say?
But if Penelope had married any of the suitors, had slept with any of the suitors, Odysseus probably would have killed her when he got back.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yes, exactly. No matter how many times he said, I love her and I want to get back to her, had she betrayed him, essentially, he would have killed her because, remember, women are property.
Yes. I mean, we see that with Zeus all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's essentially women just a mirror Zeus and Hera's relationship.
Yes. Like this, it doesn't matter. Women are merely extensions of the men who own them. This is why, essentially, for the context of the book, Odysseus is justified in having Telemachus kill the slave girls because they essentially, as I said, betrayed the house. And in doing so, they must be like gotten rid of because it also is Odysseus is trying to get home. Like that's the story of the Odyssey. And as we mentioned earlier, like he gets home in book 13 and there's like 10 books left. Because it's not just the arrival of Ithaca that is Odysseus returning home. It is him getting back to his homeland, reclaiming his wife, reclaiming his son, reclaiming his place as king and head of his household. And that includes removing every trace of the suitors. So Athena helps him brutally slaughter all of them, get rid of them, reclaim through a very violent act, show that he is the masculine figure in charge.
I am the king of Ithaca.
I am the king of Ithaca, and then thus killing the slave girls because in their bodies and memories, they would have carried the traces of the suitors who had, tried to usurp Odysseus' place in his home.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I found really interesting while I was doing the study and research is realizing how we talked about earlier, the parts we think of as the Odyssey, the adventure at sea and the story is such a small part. Because it's not just the getting home, it's the making home what it was to him again. And that is more than just showing. Because if he had just walked in the front door and been like, Penelope, I'm home, the suitors would have killed him.
Yeah, 100%.
They would have killed him and Telemachus too if they had just walked in the front door.
Yeah.
And Athena knew that, and that's why she set up the disguises and the tricks and the stories and kept the one suitor guy in you ain't going nowhere.
No, you gotta stay.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I found interesting is that a lot of ancient scholars believed that the scene where Odysseus and Penelope are reunited in their marriage bed was the true ending of the Odyssey. Yeah. And that's book 23. There's a whole other one more ass book.
Yeah.
And it's seen this way probably because what happens next is a lot, doesn't look good for Odysseus at all, and is more of a poetic ending. I think they liked the poetry of them being all this time Odysseus trying to get back to her, and we got rid of the suitors, we got rid of this, the home is back, my son is here, I have my wife, and it's the beauty and the poetry of them being reunited.
Yeah.
And that some would claim that oh, you can tell the language of the book, it's not the same, it was added on later, and most modern scholars are no, that's not true. The book 24 is part of the story of the Odyssey that was being told. That canonized story that we talked about earlier. So, book 24 is called Restless Spirits. And Ithaca is on the brink of civil war. Because Odysseus just murdered the sons of a bunch of prominent households. Because who do you think the suitors were?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. That's a problem. Because their fathers are all pissed.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine why, but it's also
flip side.
Raise your sons better.
Also that. But Will said actually in the introduction to the Odyssey, she has this interesting part where she talks about they're all, like I said, Telemachus' age. They're young 20-somethings. Young 20-something men are assholes. Unless they're given the opportunity to grow up and mature, which is what Telemachus is in the process of doing throughout this thing. He is trying to grow up and mature into manhood, into adulthood, and follow his father's footsteps.
Yeah.
And these suitors are not allowed the chance to do that because they get shot through the throat by an arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so Restless Spirits is what this book is called because in part because it starts with Hermes leading the suitors to the underworld. Which is wild. Taking them from the house to the underworld. It's kind of great. And there they find Achilles' ghost, Patroclus' ghost, and Ajax, and a bunch of dudes for the Trojan War are all here. You remember these characters from the Iliad? Well, they make a reappearance. So it's talking, bemoaning, being dead, what have you. Agamemnon talks about his wife again. How she could, because remember how earlier I said that story was reflecting. It comes back around.
Yeah.
it comes back around. And so he's talking about essentially how Odysseus is fortunate that his wife Penelope was so loyal and true, unlike his wife was. And it's like, okay, dude, we definitely in this story left out the part about how she killed you because you sacrificed your daughter. So we moved past it. So there's that. It's the underworld. And then kind of talking about how like all this happened because like, this is the will of the gods, essentially. Morality doesn't have
really, but
yeah. Well, yes. Morality has very little to do with it. These beings, the humans acted in accordance to what the gods would have wanted them to do. Yeah. Even if the gods told them don't do that. They still did it because that's what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting scene, but I want to talk about the end, in which all of basically the father of the main suitor, who is the biggest asshole, who's the first one that Odysseus shot in the throat, rallies up the townsfolk and essentially like, Odysseus sucks. He went to war. Now he came back. Where's his crew? He got all of his men killed. He killed all of our sons. Fuck this guy. So they show up at the palace at Ithaca and are ready to throw down. And so Odysseus rallies his troops. The people are on his side. Telemachus, like his father, like all these other people. And they're like, okay, we're gonna go. And Athena's there, disguised again. And she has Odysseus' father throw his spear. Just one spear. Throws the spear. And it flies true, because Athena. And it kills the head rabble-rouser. Yeah, the father. The other father. Right. Kills him dead. And you think that would be enough. But no. Odysseus is super fucking ready to fight. Like, he's on board. He's like, more bloodshed. Let's go. Like,
let's be honest here. He was a king that went to war for his country, right? Mm-hmm. And then he comes back and all these people are like, you're a piece of shit king. I get it. They slaughtered his sons. And like, I'm not defending Odysseus in a lot of aspects.
No one is defending Odysseus here.
But what I am defending is the fact that he is still the rightful king and these people were being dicks to his fucking wife.
Not untrue.
He has the authority to, like, he could have straight up publicly executed these people and those guys could not have done anything about it.
Mm-hmm. But that goes against the will of the gods. Yeah. Because after Athena has Odysseus' father, Laertes, kill the other dude, she's basically decided, and we're done here. Odysseus decided, nah, we're going to go to war. And Telemachus is like, fuck yeah, dad, I'll make you proud. And so they charge through and start slashing. And so Zeus sends a lightning bolt down because Athena she's still in disguise, but she cries out, Ithacans, stop this disruption, shed no more blood, go your separate ways at once. And a lot of them like, oh, fuck, and drop their weapons and start to back off. But Odysseus and Telemachus are like not swayed. So Zeus throws a fucking lightning bolt, and that's what gets them to stop and look over. And she is like all steely-eyed and is like, I am the goddess of war. Like, she is Athena.
Yeah.
And she says, Odysseus, you are adaptable. You always find your solutions. Stop this war or Zeus will be enraged at you. He was glad to obey. Then Athena made the warring sides swear solemn oaths of peace for future times, still in her guise as mentor. And that's the end of the Odyssey.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that last part is important, even though like early scholars would want to say it ends with them reuniting. If the point of the story is for Odysseus to return to his home, when he left Ithaca, he was king in a time of peace.
Yeah.
And so it has to end with him once again being a king in a time of peace. You cannot leave Ithaca on the brink of civil war.
Yeah.
And so what Athena does, getting rid of the person who would not agree to peace, and then calming all the war and making them agree to peace for all future times. That is the end of Odysseus returning home in every way.
Yeah.
So, DJ, I'll ask you again. Why do you think we don't have those parts of the story? Why do you think when we think of the Odyssey, it's only the adventure at sea?
Because it's taught to children?
Yeah, probably not wrong, though. Like, it's a little easier to adapt the Cyclops adventure. And
this fun sailing story of this guy struggling, right? We see those kinds of stories all the time.
Yeah.
But if we want to do the real 500-page epic, maybe we do that in college. I don't know. I don't take college classes. But, like, yeah. I heard, like, when you bring up the Odyssey, everyone's like, oh, I heard about that freshman through sophomore year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you read it, like that's where you read it. Then when we get into like real ass epics like Beowulf, we read that whole thing senior year.
Yeah, Beowulf. Beowulf is like 100-something pages long.
Yeah, but it's still an
Beowulf
epic, you know?
It's still an epic, but compared to the Odyssey, Beowulf is nothing. I could read Beowulf in an afternoon.
Yeah.
Like, I read it in 4 hours. I actually have the Maria Dava, I believe is what her name is, Davena. She did a modern, slangy translation of Beowulf. Super fucking fun. It begins with, bro, come, let me tell you a story in our mead hall. I will tell you about Beowulf and his kick-ass things. Like,
nice.
It's great.
Nice.
Should we do a Beowulf episode?
Maybe we'll do a remyth on
you
that
could
one.
do. It's an audiobook. It's a good audiobook.
I'll have to listen to it.
Yeah. So, watch that terrible Beowulf movie. Jesus Christ.
I believe it.
Weird movie. Weird fucking movie. Not what this episode is about.
Nope.
So, I think you're right. I think it's told to children, but I also think it's because it's the story of when you say, oh, it's the story of a man returning home. If you're telling a story to like a younger audience, kids and stuff, or you're just trying to simplify it down into that, the physical act of overcoming trials at sea and getting home seems to be it.
Yeah.
But, as we
The
talked about,
overarching theme of a man returning to what his home once was is a little more complex for a fucking 13, 14-year-old to get.
Mm-hmm. Or a movie, or a comic book adaptation, or Wishbone. An episode about Wishbone.
Wishbone is taught to kids. Like that is kids, right? We're 13, 14, those are teens. Wishbone is kids, children, little boys and girls.
I would actually almost say that Wishbone does it a lot better because it does actually end with him kicking out the suitors.
Yeah.
And thus truly returning to his place back on Ithaca. We actually did a remyth episode on Wishbone over on the Patreon, $10 plus patrons, if you want to hear us gush about how cute that dog was.
So it was a very cute dog.
What's the story, Wishbone? So that's the Odyssey.
The Odyssey.
That is the Odyssey. And I want to take a minute. So we talked about the Odyssey. I want to just take a minute to talk about the impact of the Odyssey. Because this story is ancient. And we talk about ancient stories on this podcast, but it is the foundation of those stories that we talk about. Like I was talking about earlier, like Greece didn't really have a set of like this, like Artemis was way different in Sparta than she was on Athens.
Yeah.
But they had the Odyssey and they had these Homeric poems. Like those were what everything was based off of, what it was meant to be a Greek and live at like those ideals. Those came from this. The language of the Odyssey this story was so important that eventually it's hard to track down when the Odyssey was first like written down because the language of the Odyssey was so influential. Eventually everyone was talking like that. Like it may have started in one place because that's usually how you figure out where something was written. Yeah. You figure out the dialect, the linguistic. It was so important that eventually it kind of just spread throughout and it's hard to track that way because it became so ingrained.
Yeah.
And we could talk about a lot of things. We could talk about how the Iliad and the Odyssey, though they are together, they are part one, part two, they were probably written hundreds of years apart. Like, these stories probably developed at very different times. We could talk about how we say... Sorry, DJ?
No, it's just agreeing with you, like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because, like, there are some elements of, like, the way characters or, like, peoples behave in the Iliad that the view of them is very different in the Odyssey, and it kind of reflects probably changing times, like the Phoenicians, like how Greeks thought about them in when the Iliad versus when the Odyssey was being told. Very different opinions on the Phoenicians. But we talk about how, like, we say it's Homer. We call them the Homeric stories, the Homeric poets. It was Homer, the blind poet. But was this a real person? And the answer is we don't know. Maybe there was a guy named Homer, but he probably didn't invent these stories whole cloth. Like, the general consensus is the Iliad and the Odyssey probably were not written together. Were probably the individual stories written for the Iliad and the Odyssey and were not like taken from other places and hodgepodge together later on.
Yeah.
But were very likely based off of oral traditions that were told at different times and developed separately. And then whoever sat down and turned them into this cohesive story was probably one person, because the writing style is too similar to have been done by different people, but it probably wasn't invented by one person, you know?
Yeah.
It's just fascinating because it is so important and was also lost for thousands of years.
Yeah, it was.
Like, Greece was lost, the Alexandria burned, and we didn't have it anymore. But the Odyssey survived in Arabic in the Byzantine Empire. And when the Byzantine Empire fell in the 1400s, those things got smuggled to Italy just in time for the Renaissance. And that's when you see this, like, renaissance of the Odyssey. It was literally being rediscovered by Western storytellers.
Yeah.
And you would get translators who would give you very, very different interpretations of the Odyssey. The first English interpretation done in like 1600 something, not exactly 1600.
Yeah.
You have a very Christianized version of Odysseus.
Oh, I believe it.
Like, that was a thing. In Dante Alighieri's Inferno, Odysseus is there in the 8th circle of hell, where liars go.
Oh my god.
Essentially. So he's called Ulysses there because Dante was using like the Romanized version of it. But it's this thing that existed for so long and kind of for a while stopped existing because we forgot about it. We being, Western canon. And then came back and has never gone away since.
I wonder what stories might resurface here in 100 years that we've totally forgotten about that were written only like 200 years ago.
I wonder, right? Because it's so different the way story is preserved now.
Yeah.
And what we're finding. But it's like the parts of it that we know now, like we're talking about, like, will the parts we know now be the big parts? Like the biggest part of the Odyssey is probably like the part people know well, even if you're just a casual, like, what's the Odyssey? That guy kills a Cyclops, right?
Yeah.
And that's like the smallest part of it. So I think another fascinating thing about it is, like, even though the Odyssey is so big and so influential, it's also so undervalued. And this is not me saying, oh, people just don't know the classics. They're just so... I'm not saying that at all. I'm not. I didn't know a lot of this until we did this fucking podcast, okay?
People just don't know the classics.
Honestly, we don't. It's the way it's taught is different. But I think it's so interesting that a book that is so just factually important, like, to the way Western story developed, like Beowulf is so important. We just don't know it as well. Like, we just know pieces of it. And it's a story that is so impactful that we just lose pieces of it. I'm not saying that, it's a bad thing, we should all know it more, we need to do better about teaching it. I just think that's an interesting thing to know about story and the way we retell it, because we don't always tell it whole cloth, and sometimes we pick the pieces we want to retell.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm not saying
that's the whole purpose
bad.
of our fucking podcast, you know?
Yeah. I'm not saying thing bad. I'm just saying thing exists.
Maybe read into it a little bit.
Yeah, maybe study, like, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, like, why is that? And there's no steadfast answer as to why that is the way it is, but it is. It is. And I think since we spent all this time talking about the Odyssey, we talked very little about
what
the
everybody
Odyssey.
knows is the Odyssey.
Yeah, like in Sea of Monsters. But I'm also, like, now that we're talking about, I could almost see that, like, at the beginning of the story, Percy wants to get to Camp Half-Blood so bad. He wants to go there so badly because it's home to him. And when he gets there, it's not as he left it. Chiron is gone. Tantalus is there. He's bringing back it's not how he left it. And so and Talia's tree is dying. It's unsafe. This is not home. Percy wants to go home. And so his journey through the Sea of Monsters, doing the check marks, right? The less than 100 pages.
The Cyclops. I mean, let's be real here. That book is smaller than the Odyssey.
Well, I mean, yes, Sea of Monsters is. And I actually think maybe, like...
It's either the smallest or the second smallest. Titan's Curse might be smaller.
I think so. But I would like to point out that Sea of Monsters is longer than the part of the Odyssey that is the sea adventure, the Sea of Monsters. But
like how much is him encountering Scylla and the Cersei?
Here's the thing. Some of those are in multiple chapters, but so is like, it's not like Polyphemus has his own book or
yeah.
A lot of those adventures are in the same book together. It's only like 5. But through his adventures in the Sea of Monsters, like Percy is trying to make Camp Half-Blood home again, right? Like he gets the fleece to restore the barriers. He's able to use the Iris message to get Luke to confess that he set up Chiron and gets Tantalus. I almost want to call him Telemachus. Gets Tantalus kicked out, gets Chiron brought back. So
thank God he's the only guy who can actually fucking play me in Pinochle. See ya.
I know, right? God. Dionysus being like kind of sweet to Meg because she knows what Pinochle is like.
No, it's great, right?
Like, I love that.
Like, wait, anyway. You play Pinochle? Let's do
wow.
It's okay.
So how do you know that? Okay. Just also calls her Meg. Calls her McCaffrey. Like, doesn't fuck up her name.
Yeah.
Like, instantly, like, I have deep respect for you, child. You know the old ways.
I mean, he calls Percy by his name like once or twice, you know?
Once.
Yeah, because it's like, he did
and
something.
And after his son dies, the whole thing. He's feeling emotional. So in Sea of Monsters, it is, I would say, like, I didn't notice it until we did this, but I do think, like, Rick Riordan did do that. He did actually have that theme of Odysseus returning home. Odysseus restoring his home. It's Sea of Monsters is not just Percy does the Odyssey, it's Percy restores his home. It's also Annabeth actually does the Odyssey because she's actually doing all the Odysseus
Annabeth
shit.
does like the Odysseus, what Odysseus doing. Percy has the Odysseus feelings.
He does. He has the Odysseus feelings. This is true. Percy is the theme of the Odyssey and Annabeth is the plot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about just, if you can, readers or listeners, if you can, listeners, I would recommend picking up Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey. And I will not take a stance and claim that it's the best one of all time or the only one you should have read. No, you should read a lot of translations. Like, that's what's cool about translations, is that much like the different way we retell stories reflects what is important to us in the retelling, the different way stories are translated also reflects what was important at the time and to the translator. Like in the 1600s, when also we have a very Christian-ified Odysseus, living up to the ideas of the culture. But she has this fantastic, like, 80-page introduction that I did read, which just dives into and breaks down so much about the Odyssey and its impact and all these things and, like, the themes of it, and that's really cool. And she has, like, her translator's note, where she talks about how when she was 8 years old, her primary school put on, like, a shortened version of the Odyssey, like songs and costumes, and she played Athena. And that was the beginning of her love of just mythology in general. Like, she read them all. And then, eventually she was like, well, I want to translate the Odyssey into English, and like talks about her process and that. And that's all very cool, and the decisions she made and like what she learned of like the biases that other translators had, and that's all very interesting, and it's definitely worth reading. But the thing that I want to just kind of close out on, if I may, is that like it's not archaic. The language she uses isn't archaic. I've quoted her a lot throughout this last season, and you'll notice that like though there is like a cadence that is not the way we would speak or see prose written, the words are not the thou. It's not that this weird Shakespearean thing that some translators will do to make it feel more ancient. Because even that ancient English is about as far away from the original Odyssey as the way we speak today is. It's not any closer than we are. So that's not honest to do it that way. But, because she mentions, like, all modern translations of ancient texts exist in a time, a place, and a language that is entirely alien from those of the original. All modern translations are equally modern.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, you're never going to find the true translation of the Odyssey.
Yeah, unless you can find, like, the ancient Greek translation.
Which, like, if you want to learn ancient Greece and go read that. Arabic, yeah, you want to go do that? Like, yeah, that's kick-ass. Go do that. That's not saying that's wrong to do. But, like, that's another thing that's, like, interesting. It's, like, they all have value. Just like all the different versions of the stories have value. It's just important to recognize what that value is that you're looking for and what they're trying to say. I want to read just this last passage, right? She talks a little bit about how we were exposed to the Odyssey a lot, essentially. Like, kids are introduced to it, like we talked about, like movies and comics, like we get it, but it's interesting. So this is going to be a little bit of a long passage. I hope you will indulge me. The Odyssey is a very ancient and very foreign text, although its long-standing prominence in Anglo-American and European cultures may mask its strangeness. Homer's concerns with loyalty, families, migrants, consumerism, violence, war, poverty, identity, rhetoric, and lies are all in ways deeply familiar, but we see them here in unfamiliar guises. The poem is concerned, above all, with the duties and dangers involved in welcoming foreigners into one's home. I hope my translation will enable contemporary readers to welcome and host this foreign poem with all the right degrees of warmth, curiosity, openness, and suspicion. There is a stranger inside your home. He is old, ragged, and dirty. He is tired. He has been wandering homeless for a long time, perhaps many years. Invite him inside. You do not know his name. He may be a thief. He may be a murderer. He may be a god. He may remind you of your husband, your father, or yourself. Do not ask questions. Wait. Let him sit on a comfortable chair and warm himself by your fire. Bring him some food, the best you have, and a cup of wine. Let him eat and drink until he is satisfied. Be patient. When he is finished, he will tell you his story. Listen carefully. It may not be as you expect.
Nice.
I think that's a really interesting way, because that's the last passage of her introduction, and then you go into the Odyssey. I think that's a really interesting way to introduce the Odyssey, because this is not the story I expected. I thought I knew what I was getting into when we started this. I thought I knew this is what the Odyssey is. I haven't read it, but I know what the Odyssey is. At surface value, you see the beggar, the dirty, the homeless beggar, and you're like, I know what you're about. And they actually get into it, and you realize maybe it'll surprise you. For good or for ill, this story is going to surprise you. And so I think if you like Greek mythology, Emily Wilson's version of the Odyssey, or translation of the Odyssey, is worth your time.
That's all. I mean, if that's it.
That's all I have. Yeah, I don't have a lot of the breaking. I'm definitely breaking tradition with this episode. I have not brought different modern retellings, of which there are a lot. We talked about Wishbone. There was a TV show called American Odyssey some years back about an American soldier and her journeys. And there's a lot if you want to find that. But I wanted this episode to kind of just be about the Odyssey, because sometimes it's good.
Yeah, especially
to
since
dig into the text.
I mean, I don't know if a lot of our listeners really knew the Odyssey like it actually is, rather than because if we think about it, this is a retelling of what we know of the Odyssey, which is just that small portion of it.
Yes.
Versus the actual whole Odyssey.
And I think also circles back to, like, it's good to know the original stories. Like, it's good to retell them, and I love, But like I said, like, the Sea of Monsters is Percy restoring his home. And that's a theme of the Odyssey that I didn't recognize until we actually talk about it. So it's good to know, to see, to appreciate, because I suddenly appreciate Sea of Monsters way more than I did 2 weeks ago.
It was a great book, and that's a great story. Yeah, it is all the elements of it. And that, DJ, concludes season 2 of Podcast of Poseidon. Season 2 of Podcast of Poseidon is done.
Is done. Thank you all for joining us on, I'm going to say it, thank you for joining us on our Odyssey.
Yeah, it was a great time to talk about Sea of Monsters and all of the myths inside of it, and the Odyssey today.
And over this last season, in addition to like getting to explore these stories and stuff, the podcast has grown a lot. Like obviously in numbers. I see the download numbers, like, welcome to the show, friends. We're happy to have you here.
We do appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us, whether this is the very first episode you listened to, or whether you've listened to the beginning, or whether you just started. Welcome. We've grown there. We've also, I think, really cool. The podcast has grown as like a member of this community. During this season, we were invited to join the Riordanverse League of Podcasting, the Discord. And that's how we got to be friends with these other podcasters who also do Riordanverse stuff and listen to like Robert from the Damn Meme page, who now makes memes, who I personally credit with a lot of our newfound listenership. Like, Robert is an invaluable part of the Podcast of Poseidon marketing plan.
They have been great. And I mean, Darren also got to expand to just another podcast in general.
I did, yeah. Being in this group, Fran of the Best Damn Camp Pod did invite me to join the Once Upon a Time podcast that Robert's on, that Erica and Carter of Sue We Bear Do podcast are on, and that's just really cool to do, because I think when I say I'm a podcaster, I get to mean it because I do 2 podcasts.
Yeah.
It's 2.
It is. It's just been a lot of fun, honestly. And like, it's, as we've noted earlier, last month, it's been a whole year. You know, we've been doing this for a year now.
A year. And I didn't know what that year would bring, but I didn't think it would bring a whole bunch of cool internet podcasting friends. That's tight. Like, wow. I've actually never had that before. Like,
it's super cool.
But also, like, I don't know, that's kick-ass to have these, like, really neat people to engage with. And also, DJ,
it's a lot of fun.
I feel like we've grown as a
bond.
Oh,
100%.
Yeah, I feel closer. I feel a lot closer to you.
Yeah.
I mean, you've always been my brother, but, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like I know you better as
we grew up, you grow up, and, like, eventually when you leave, especially, like, around the divorce, you chose mom. I wanted to stick with dad, you know?
Listen, trauma has a lot of things.
There's a lot of answers. I don't think there was a wrong decision. I think what was right for us in the moment. I was forced with mom, but I always wanted to be with dad. And then like 7th, 8th grade, it's like, no, dad is full time.
Yeah.
So.
Divorce is hard.
Yeah, divorces are hard, especially on 4 kids.
4 kids. Now we live in different counties.
Yeah.
So yeah, this I think has been good for us.
Yeah, and so growing closer it's been just great, and I'm very stoked that I got to live with John.
Yeah,
short as it was.
Yeah, well, motherfucker got a good job in a different county, also. So honestly,
damn it. But I don't blame him. But not what this segment's about, honestly.
Yeah, this is about. So thank you, listeners, for being with us on these journeys that we've had.
I do appreciate it. And if on it, like, we're not going to stop. We're going to stop uploading on the main feed.
So we're going on hiatus. So I guess we should talk about what that means at the end of season. If you were with us at the end of season 1, we know we went on a brief hiatus. We will be doing that again.
Yes, we will be going on a hiatus again. And this time, last time we continued to post bonus episodes. Mm-hmm. We will be doing that same thing. Mm-hmm. And these bonus episodes are going to be about me telling Darien about the Disney's Twisted Tales. Because she's never read them.
I haven't.
And I just started listening to them. And if that interests you, come check us out on our Patreon.
Yes. So if you miss us and don't want to wait until we're back in the new year, and for new content, you can definitely hop over to our Patreon. And for just $5 a month, you will get access to these bonus episodes that we will be uploading every other week, in which DJ is going to tell me about these retellings of Disney movies. So excited for that. You will also have access to the past year's worth of bonus episodes. All of the episodes we've uploaded. You got a little taste of that in October. If you liked it and miss us, $5. You could literally just pay for $5 for a single month and binge listen to all of them. I won't blame you. I understand.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just kind of do this because we enjoy doing it. We aren't saying, hey, go do this, right?
No.
We are asking you. We would love you to do it, but if you can't, understandable.
The bonus episodes are a thank you to the patrons who donate money to us every month to keep the main feed flowing smoothly, which we would be doing regardless, but it's definitely super nice to get that little kick of like, hey, I like what you do. Here's some cash. I got a little bit of extra. If you don't have the drachmas, no worries. Like, I get that. I don't donate to every podcast I listen to too. I have no judgment for our listeners who just like the main feed stuff. Like, your listening sip and your time. You are giving us your time already.
Yeah, it is. It's wonderful.
Would not expect you to do else. But if you feel so inclined or want to hit up those bonus episodes, you can do that. Podcast of Poseidon at patreon.com. Patreon.com/podcast of Poseidon. And that's there. We've got the remake episodes we mentioned sometimes. Those are for $10 plus patrons. It's a little bit higher because they take a little bit more time to do. So it's a bigger thank you. Yeah. But yeah, so a message to the patrons. Yes, the main feed is going on hiatus. you are still going to get those bonus episodes. So you're still, thanking us. We are still thanking you. You're going to get the Twisted Tales. You'll get the Remyth episodes if you're on that tier. Like, those will be there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
The main feed will be on hiatus as we gear up for season 3, The Titan's Curse, which was my favorite book of the original trilogy. We will see if it still is.
Might be my least favorite book of the original 5.
Interesting. We are going to go all in and see what's up.
We're going to have fun, and I don't imagine that it's going to be as long as this season was. Then again, I didn't imagine this season was going to be longer than Lightning Thief, and here we are.
And here we fucking are. So we'll just see what happens. There's a lot of I don't remember what's fully in Titan's Curse. Well, I remember more than I did before because I have listened to the Best Damn Camp Pod and Seaweed Brain go through their Titan's Curse episodes, so I have a little bit more all right, this happens. We do have some other Riordanverse podcasters who have expressed interest in talking about some myths from that book. So we'll have more guests from guests who have actually read the Percy Jackson books.
Yeah, and this time they'll actually be able to join in the conversation.
It'll be great. No shade on our past guests. They knew a lot about what we
little shade on our past guests.
Listen, Tim O'Connor knew everything we needed about DuckTales, and Leo Garcia knew everything we needed to know about MacGuffin.
That episode was about DuckTales. That was not about anything else. That episode was about DuckTales.
Bring our guests.
That should have been a Remyth episode.
I wanted to talk about DuckTales.
No, I know.
That
was not an episode about the Percy Jackson books.
I stand by it. It was about Ithaca. It was important. It's a whole thing that Odysseus is trying to return to. And had I known more about it now that
I'm certain we did not bring up Odysseus returning to Ithaca.
Yes,
we talked about Ithaquack.
No, I frameworked it. Davis, there was a framing device. I had the appropriate framing device to justify the episode. Don't doubt my skills. I'm cutting all of this. I'm cutting all this. You know what they were? So we're done here, I think. This is the energy. You know what? We had such strong, I feel like a little melancholy, a little wistful, and we ended up here, as we always do.
Yeah, ended up with the classic sibling banter.
The sibling.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to me and my brother. Hey, I don't know if we ever mentioned this, but hey, we really are siblings, though. That's not 100%.
A bit. That is, it's not a bit. She doesn't call me brother because maybe we look alike, but we're maybe because we're super close, right? No. We are genuinely siblings. If you didn't know about us talking about our mother in some past episodes, unless Darien has cut that.
No. We talk about mom and dad a lot. I keep
there you
that.
Go. Yeah. So we are genuinely siblings.
So, I don't know. And these two siblings will be back with you Tuesday, January 4th, kicking off the new year to talk about the Titan's Curse.
How fun.
And until then, if you really miss us, you can hop over to the Patreon and listen to those episodes. If you really miss us and don't have the Drachmas, you can re-listen to the Backstock too. That's okay. Tell us your favorite episodes. Download those. If you
we'd love to message you.
Yeah, if you really, really miss us, you can follow us on Instagram. You can also follow us on Twitter, but I'm not as active there. So Instagram and Podcast to Poseidon, that's where you want to go.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate every single one of you, and we will see you in the coming year of 2022. Until next time.
Don't be like Zeus.
Podcast to Poseidon is created and hosted by Darien and DJ Smartt. It's edited by Darien Smartt. The show is produced by Darien and DJ Smartt, as well as
Tim O'Connor,
the Crystal Con Man.
Our music is Athens Festival by Martin Hain, and our cover art is by Audrey Miller. You can find her on Instagram at bombshellnutshellart.
Like the show? Ready for more? Support Podcast to Poseidon on Patreon. Just $1 gets you exclusive bonus content. Find out more at patreon.com/podcasttoposeidon.
Can't spare the drachmas? You can support the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or by sharing us with your friends. Find all of our episodes and episode transcripts at podcasttoposeidon.com.
Thanks for listening.